discussion. So do you want to just say a few words about, because Envato has been such a success story, do you want to just say a few words about that, very briefly?
So we're 11 years old. We are primarily a creative digital marketplace where people buy and sell everything from After Effects files to website themes to photos to graphics files. And we're entirely bootstrapped. We have a team of about 300, most of whom are in Melbourne, and yeah, we're launching a lot of new stuff all the time. So so we're big on the innovation and entrepreneurial thinking.
Great. And Qaizar, would you like to just introduce your role?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for inviting me to the panel. And like Cyan's name, at least in the US, everyone wants to put a U after a Q with my name, so my name is more with the K, like Qaizar, not a Qaizar. I have nothing to do with it either, it's my parents. Let's just put it on them. So just quickly, in terms of Taeed, Taeed is a very new company focusing on smart home textiles. It is actually backed by one of the largest integrated home textile company who wanted to get into smart home textiles. And this is my second entrepreneurial venture. The first one was after leaving DuPont and starting Textronics, which was a smart textiles company, and now this is more on smart home textiles, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
Great. So we've got 4 experienced entrepreneurs and innovative thinkers here on the stage. So I think if I could ask you to explain perhaps why is innovative thinking and entrepreneurial thinking important?
Very early on in our life as a company, we were almost disrupted. We had one core product which was doing very well. We had been launching a whole bunch of other stuff in the meantime, basically because we thought it was really a fun thing to do and the core business was going very well. But then a competitor came along and they proceeded to focus exclusively on our core offering, which was flash files. We got quite stressed about this, but in the meantime, the other things that we were launching did start to grow very slowly. All of a sudden, Apple decided that the new iPhones were not going to support Flash in their operating system anymore, and Flash went the way of the dodo very, very quickly. If we had been entirely focused on Flash, our business would have died probably within about a year. Because we had diversified, we survived. So we really decided that innovation and the constant sort of release of new products, looking for constant new areas of growth, what are new ways we can solve our customers' problems, was really, really paramount to us.
Yeah, so I would probably separate innovative thinking from entrepreneurial thinking just for a minute. Innovative thinking is, at least from my career, has always been there, be it a large company, be it a small company. But my experience was like when you are a startup or a small company, that's when entrepreneurial thinking kicks into full gear, because at that time, it is kind of do or die, survive, as you mentioned. But more importantly, at that time, all the barriers or shackles or baggages are kind of left on the side, and you do just what it takes to make it happen. And that becomes very exciting. And they kind of go hand in hand, but then, I mean, my experience has been in a big company like DuPont, then in a startup of 2 people, then another big company like Adidas, more like a German big company like Adidas, and then again another startup, right? So I see the difference slightly between innovative thinking and entrepreneurial thinking.
Not all new ideas are great ideas, and not all new ventures are going to be successful. And Ari, you talked about a whole stack of amazing different things that are happening. And I remembered that old phrase that we all grew up with, you know, invention is, necessity is the mother of invention. But increasingly we're sort of thinking about it the other way, that invention is the mother of necessity. So many of the things that you talked about, you pointed to the fact that we didn't even know we needed it. And now it's essential, you know, like an iPhone, but it wasn't that long ago that we were perfectly happy without it. So we're creating necessity. So when you're looking at these ideas for businesses, and and what's coming, how do you judge what is a good idea versus a bad idea when as James said, things are changing so much that you don't know what we're going to want or need?
We talked about innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm missing two words, which is creativity and failing. And the only way to judge an idea is to not to be afraid of failing or doing it. I often ask companies to include in their employee performance tools how many times they failed, right? And if they failed 10 times, they get a higher increase in the salary if they actually failed 3 times. And it's the same way, why don't we teach, in our education system, 2 hours a week lessons how to fail for students? And I think, for me, the best ways to judge ideas is not to be afraid to try the ideas. Because we live in a world of we know what we know. We know the things that we know, but we know the things that we don't know. And for me, creativity happens in the things that we don't know that we don't know. And it's these small surprises. And I always believe that innovation is the ability of assertive leadership to monetize the individual creativity. Unfortunately, we tend to think innovation is a process. No, it's a cultural thinking. And creativity is what feeds that culture. And failing is the process of actually testing the ideas, and that's how, since that's what I'm pushing forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. The challenge is to do it without going broke or spending too much money. And it's sort of the distinction between soft mind and hard mind. Soft mind is the mind that puts lots of different things together and comes up with an unusual idea no one's ever had before. But then you've got to put on your hard mind and think about a clever evidence-based way of finding out whether that idea is any good or not. And perhaps inviting customers in to do tiny little trials, not just rolling it out through your whole business on a hunch because you reckon it's a beauty, but just being very small scale, assessing results very evidence-based to find out whether something's going to work.
We have hack events regularly at Innovato, so probably the team spends about 8% of their time working on whatever project they think is going to shift the dial, either make our customers' lives better or our internal processes better. And within that, we really encourage them to sort of think outside the box, think of something quite ambitious, but find the leanest way possible to test that. So look at what our success metrics might be. Can we get to X result within X amount of time, with X amount of spend, and solve this problem for this small number of customers? And if they can do that, we know that the idea has viability.
Yeah, and in one of my experiences about a product that you want to launch and you want to do that in a limited way, in a controlled way, at least for the first time, it's very difficult to know that the product is just 100% right and going to work perfectly, right? So you have to take that chance. Is like, okay, it's more than good enough, and there is a propensity that some certain things might not work, but you're better off moving forward with it because, as you said, even if it fails, you learn something from it and something new will come out, right? And that experience was sort of so memorialized in my mind when we first launched our heart rate monitoring sports bra, which had a combination of textile sensors built in the sport bar and electronics. Our specialty was more on the textile and textile sensors, and we were trying to combine this electronics part with that, right? We knew there was this chance of it may not necessarily work exactly the way it is, and then it may not work in all the 100 situations that will work, right? So we did take the risk with the retailer at the time and launched it, and lo and behold, certain things did not work, right? But the good part of that came out is like the other part that they really liked, right? That actually worked even better than that, and we were able to come up with that. Now, if we had been in a more like a safer environment, like one of the large companies that I work with, we would have never launched that, and we would have worked on it for another 6 to 12 months before we perfected it, right? So that is, I think, the value in terms of the entrepreneurship part of it, where you know that it is a good idea, but they'd not necessarily be 100% correct, but you can still go ahead and move it and do that.
So how do you, the failure thing is about resilience, really, that we've been talking about for quite a long time on a personal level. But when you put that into our large organisations, and you might have individuals that are resilient, but as organisations, they're obviously very intolerant of substantial failure, and shareholders are not necessarily rapt if the company's invested in a whole lot and it hasn't delivered. So how would you, how do we go about stimulating that entrepreneurial culture so necessary to success, as you've talked about, Cyan, how do you stimulate that in a large organisation?
Fear, basically. The CEO of the Commonwealth Bank in the Rev last year said if we don't innovate, we're toast. If you've got the big banks terrified of being disrupted, and for good reason, then pretty much everyone should have some degree of fear, really, about things changing to the extent that what they do now isn't going to cut it. It's very hard to get big organisations to do relatively simple things to create an innovative culture. It's not that hard to create an innovative culture. It's really hard to get big organisations to do it, but if they feel that they're in danger of being disrupted, then they'll be much more willing to.
Yeah, and if I may comment to that, I mean, how does a large company do that? I think is extremely difficult, right? In our examples, when we were a startup, right, and we did a lot of different things, some of those were stupid, crazy, but that was okay. When we got acquired by one of the large companies, right, we were told to continue that entrepreneur spirit, right, and do what makes sense, right? Certain guardrails, but every time you got close to that guardrail, you were brought in line, right? And because that is just the culture, and there are two parts to it, not that like anything right or wrong about that. With a big company, the liabilities are much more bigger, right? And they have to be extra careful, and they have to manage their potential channel conflict because they've got this big ship which makes tons and tons of money for them, and here you're trying to be disruptive about that. So I actually don't know the answer to how it works very well, but it is extremely difficult in a large company, in my opinion.
Now, Ari, you advise companies on these kind of things. What do you suggest?
I agree with the idea of fear and trauma management, but if you don't have assertive leadership, you don't have change, and that's the bottom line. You can have the most brilliant engineers on the planet if they don't have the support of the top management. And middle management is something that should be killed out of organizations, like 20 years ago. But if you don't have support of the top management, spin out and go and start your own startups. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything. CEO of one of the biggest fashion clubs in Sweden is 57 years old, and he says, well, he realized that he doesn't understand the change, and he decided to take a mentor to help him through the change. He chose a 17-year-old girl from Africa that just migrated to Sweden to mentor him through the changes of life from the way he sees it. That's assertive leadership. And if it's neither that or you do not have change in the company. And usually the assertive leaders are assholes, but Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Satya Nadella, but they build the change, and that's what an organization needs to have.
We've actually got a great example here in Victoria where one of our principals of one of our primary schools, who's 70 or something, realised that he totally didn't get the technology, and he got in a tech guy that he just met somewhere randomly, who was in his early 20s, and said, come in and tell us what to do. Now in that school, public primary school in Victoria, these kids, they're figuring out, they're solving cybersecurity problems, they're rebuilding computers, they're doing the most amazing stuff with this guy. It's an incredible story of exactly find somebody who does know kind of thing. What do you do, Cyan, in terms of continuing to maintain that culture within you were kind of born in it, but how do you keep it going? Because there's plenty of examples around of new tech companies that don't have actually great cultures when you really look into it.
I agree with Aric. I think it needs to come from the top down. So you've got, within Envato, you've got the founders and the executive team, the whole company working on those hack projects. Our CEO is currently taking 5 weeks off to start a new test on a new sort of growth experiment. So I think it's prized, it's valued, and it's really celebrated at Invato. And I think, you know, we've bred enough of a culture of it that people who aren't entrepreneurial want to come and work here so they can learn and hopefully sort of launch their own startup down the road. So that's really how we've done it in-house.
I wanted to also touch on the issue of innovation labs. So we've been talking about innovation within organisation, within the sort of core of the companies. But what about innovation labs? I know, I mean, we in the Victorian government, we try and attract companies to set up their innovation labs here and do wonderful things. But how effective do you think those labs actually are at the end of the day in terms of generating some, you know, wonderful outcomes? What's your experience? Have you ever used them?
So I don't have experience using an innovation lab directly, but I would consider like any one of our startups as an innovation lab itself, right? To me, sometimes the word lab means it is just testing it out. My recommendation would be is like, don't call it a lab, just say like, this is what we're going to do, because you're going to put your whole heart and soul as if it's going to be successful, as opposed to, in some ways, lab means I'm testing it out, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? And that to me becomes a little bit of a challenge. So whenever we've gone into something, not that we've been successful each and every time, but then we put all of our heart and soul in there to make that successful. And even when it was not very successful, it was a failure, we actually always learned something new out of it which we had not thought before and which we would not have come to if we had not tried that. So that would be at least my experience and thought process.
Any other views on innovation labs?
Well, it depends what they're used for. The danger is that a company sets up an innovation lab and they're going to come up with all this new stuff and everyone else in the company thinks, oh, well, it's their job. And that's really dangerous. Innovation should be everyone's job, and good companies harvest ideas from everyone and find the best ones. Where an innovation lab could be useful is at that point where people have ideas but everyone's really busy and they don't know what to do with them. So at that point, you know, a team submits a couple of ideas that they've come up with to the innovation lab and says your idea is to do whatever needs to be done next and find out whether it's any good. But it's very dangerous to call any part of any company the innovation bit because it sends such a terrible message to everyone else.
But James, you mentioned in your talk about this importance of having time to think. And sometimes the practicalities of working in organisations is that it is super busy and you don't get time to think. Maybe an innovation lab is around saying, okay, you're going to have time to think.
Well, for the people who are in the lab, yeah. But my point is that, you know, that should be part of everyone's day. Just a small part of their day, 10 minutes, but you think, oh, I was going to think that the innovation lab's there, and I guess that's what they do.
I think building an innovation lab is building another silo. So the world is full of innovation centers that their products will never see the day of light because they are not meant to solve any friction. And for me, the biggest gift a government or a city can give to an organization is not to tell them we are going to help you to get less taxes or here is a building, you know, that you can work. No, it's to partner with the companies and identify a niche community and the frictions to actually deploy the MVPs in the market, not in the building, but on the street. It's to create a labs without walls. It's to emphasize the reciprocal relationship between the community and the engineers. This is the only way to bring the product back to market. You create a lab, you just created another silo, and you know, that doesn't make any sense at the end of the day.
So innovative, I think we've got to actually, time's up. Sorry, okay. Okay, time is up. I'm sorry, everyone, that we didn't get time to have questions from the audience, but I understand that our 4 speakers will be going to have morning tea in the expo. I hope you guys all heard that as well. That will...
Airport, unfortunately. But really happy to talk to you as I walk up the stairs.
So be quick if you want to grab them, and if you've got a burning question to follow up with. So thank you all very much, Ari, James, Cyan and Qaizar. Thank you very much for your views and participating this morning. Thank you.